Let's talk about me. One of the earliest die-hard fascinations I remember having is a bunch of varied and unique things happening in the same general area. As a kid, my happiest non-internet related memories involved me going to places like malls, game stores, redemption arcades, play places, carnivals, water parks, even museums, provided they had a water table or a George Rhodes machine. If I had died when I was 12, heaven would have looked a lot like Clifton Hill. A notable subcategory of this obsession was things happening as a result of other things happening. Pinball machines, marble runs, domino rallies, chain reactions in general, those needlessly elaborate gumball machines, and of course mini-golf courses. For me, it seemed like any tourist trap or family fun center was drastically improved by the inclusion of a mini-golf course. Which is weird to think about because golf is notorious for being an exceedingly boring waste of time, space, and money that's only fun for rich a-holes who have nothing better to do with their lives. So why is it that scaling it down, taking away the space, and sprinkling in some
disturbing fiberglass animals
suddenly makes it into the best thing ever? Well, it's not my position to speak on behalf of the geniuses responsible, but I greatly suspect it has something to do with the fact that grass is boring. And golf, being 85% grass most of the time, inherits its inherent boringness. Sure, there's the occasional wet or sand zone, but it's always so predictable that there's ultimately no fun or memorability to be had. Which is why, upon receiving the Lifetime Boredom Award for playing all of the golf in the world, a man named Minneapolis Golfworth decided if he was going to cure the wave of chronic boredom inflicted upon the innocent masses by his great-grandfather Boardistar Golfworth, the boring king of Birmingham, he needed to provide visual and mental stimulants that varied throughout the experience, thereby breaking up the monotony and making for a more memorable and engaging experience. I mean, if you're gonna smack your balls around all day, you might as well do it in Candyland, you know, it's just basic logic. Such was the philosophy that made mini-golf so instantly appealing to pretty much everyone, including me. And when I wasn't going mini-golfing and cataclysmically sucking at it because I was always more interested in the scenery and not looking where I was going and walking headlong into a dinosaur, true story, I was watching YouTube videos about mini-golfing, and honestly, these videos still provide a quality influx of dopamine for me today. They gave me an insight into some of the most imaginative and visually elaborate recreational ball-smacking environments ever built by mankind that I would have never gotten to experience otherwise. So imagine my awe when, by complete happenstance, I clicked on a video simply titled, quote, Minigolf Maniacs. It was mind-blowing, borderline unfathomable even. I mean, it was clearly a video game, even my dumb idiot child brain could tell fiction from reality, but it was fully 3D, with fully animated levels in a wide variety of locations, a dynamically moving camera, a vast array of playable characters with distinct personalities, really creative hazards, obstacles, and set pieces, a friggin' pinball and water slide level. This was revolutionary for my child brain. Of course, I had seen and played many a mini-golf game on the internet in my day, some of which were pretty mind-blowing stuff, but to see something that wasn't from the usual top-down and/or 2D side perspective, didn't use crusty pre-rendered backgrounds, and wasn't meant to run on a first-gen iPod was rare, to say the least. And once it set in that this was a real, actual playable game, and not just a self-contained video on the internet, I knew what I desperately needed to do. Though, at the time, I had no concept of downloading things off the internet, so I just asked my mom if she could get it on my computer somehow, then I'd go do something else, have a Kit Kat, and then come back half an hour later, and oh my god, it's magic! I eagerly booted it up, drinking in the environments and characters that I recognized from the video, and then proceeded to suck so hard at the actual game that I couldn't unlock anything for at least a year. Ouch! But in my joyous time that was being had, losing the first tournament over and over while listening to the announcers' repeated quips and puns so often that I can still recite their intonations by heart, as I will now demonstrate. Ooh, that was brutal. Needs to angle this one just right. Those are the breaks. And enough golfers to drive you batty. You really need to know your geometry on a hole like this. I can't believe he blew that one. These holes just look easy, Chip, but they can be brutal. That's right, Tom. Hitting the wrong shoot could flush your whole game down the drain. It's anyone's game. So don't try that at home, kids. Sounds like a typical day at the OK Corral. They make a great habanero burger there. Explains a lot, actually. But I digress. I had never actually thought about where exactly the game came from. And to be honest, why should I? Whenever games magically appear on my desktop, it's just the magic games fairy that gives me everything I asked my mom for. But what I didn't know was not only the incredibly storied and fascinating history the game has, but how little anyone has discussed it outside of some very specific niches. So today, I aim to rise the entire prehistory, rise, fall, re-rise, and eventual fizzle into obscurity of this long-forgotten nostalgic bit of freeware, with no skipping out, no stones unturned, and no libidinous comments regarding Sandy's physique. Ready? Okay, let's start at the beginning.
Phew! Yeah!
In 1997, Dynamics, a Sierra-owned developer known for The Incredible Machine and The Incredible Machine 2, released a game for Windows computers titled 3D Ultra Minigolf, the third installment in the soon-to-be expansive 3D Ultra series following the immensely successful 3D Ultra pinball duology that had begun in 1995. For you see, when it came to adapting common real-life pastimes and amusements to a format that could easily be plugged into one's magic picture box, up until the mid-90s they were firmly trapped in the second dimension. In particular, pinball and minigolf share a very similar paradoxical pattern of impressiveness, where it seemed like no matter how advanced the graphics got or how many gizmos they tacked onto the playing field, it never fixed the fundamental flatness of the experience. And what few times they did try to play fast and loose with the viewing angle, it was always so uninvolved and basic that it could barely be considered an innovation and was quickly thrown by the wayside. In the case of minigolf games, even after graphical technology evolved from squares to Etch-a-Sketch to actual graphics to shaded graphics, it wouldn't be until 1988 that someone finally decided to incorporate
the third dimension.
Boy, you sure took your sweet ass time. I mean, Marble Madness was what, 4 years old by that point? You think it would have hit them sooner? Yeah, like that. Ironically, by the time the e-golf industry had invented non-artificial depth, they were still a tad away from fixing the problem of the actual games being aggressively basic despite their graphical improvements. I mean, I guess there was that cartoon thing on the CDI, but equally, shut up, that never happened. All of this considered means that if my research serves me correctly, this would make 3D Ultra Minigolf the world's first 3D rendered, multi-angled, miniature golfing themed home computer entertainment application. Yeah. And while this game isn't as talked about as the pinball games and didn't receive the fabled Game Boy Color port, the ultimate mark of prestige in video gaming, my expectations are still incredibly high. I mean, right away, tacky road signage is one of my absolute favorite menu aesthetics, and Sierra Dynamics games especially were my favorite implementers of it. But enough gawking, let's actually play the game. And I hope you're enjoying this, because this 45-second long ditty bit of elevator music is the only sound that played for me on this version of the game. I'm not kidding, by the way. Even though I can confirm that this game has MIDI files, it never used them the entire time that I played. And I don't know if it was a problem with my virtual machine, or the game files, or if there was some setting I missed. I couldn't get any music aside from the intro logo and this. Although honestly, after hearing some of the music... I don't think I'm missing out. Okay, fine, some of these tracks are genuinely decent and fit the vibe of the corresponding stages, with a great mixture of catchy and atmospheric pieces that vary in instrumentation throughout the game. Well, maybe except for the windmill hole, which features 3 clarinets doing the ugliest harmonization ever composed. And speaking of ugly, just listen to the haunted house hole. Who do you think you are, coming in here just playing its sloppy rendition of Toccata and calling that a music track? I don't know what's scarier though, that or the fact that the only marker available is hot pink. But aside from all that, and this weird graphical glitch that I kept getting, the game is still a relatively good time. I mean, you know what's gonna be when you start up a new game, and whoever originally had the game files had a name registered called Nipples. And he defaults to red. Do I need to get some petroleum jelly? Look, I don't want this whole look over to be me complaining about things that aren't necessarily the game's fault, like the fixed 640x480 aspect ratio, or the Wax Museum computer graphics, or the times when the whole announcers overlap over themselves. Because the game has just as many perfectly non-air specific flaws that I can point out, like the fact that so many of the holes are aggressively open-ended. I'm all for more imaginative environments and methods of traversal and not being railroaded with guiding walls, but with all the space that you have access to and all the different ways you can reach the hole, the limited camera visibility makes it difficult to aim and power your shots correctly, and even more so for a new player who hasn't come to terms with the confusing relations between the power meter and the putting distance. Stupid glitch. Yeah, guess I'll just hit it anywhere and it'll fix itself. Oh god, what have I done? What's happening? Although, in fairness, despite all of this, the game still manages to provide enough interest and charm factor that the flaws didn't bother me as much. It oozes with the same inherent visual charm as the Incredible Machine games of the era. It's even got a whole dang incredible machine themed, 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 whole dang incredible. There's also plenty of variety in the locations, from spaceports to exotic jungles to seaside areas to live active volcanoes. Ish, is this what minigolfing looked like in the late 90s? Because I've been before and it looked nothing like this. The closest thing my local course is set to lava was the glowy pencils. And the graphics, aside from the obvious exceptions, are equally charming and serve the cartoony visuals well. And the environments even have dynamic animations outside of the obstacles and hazards, which arguably makes it more jarring when this sort of thing happens. I mean, it might be trying to evoke the dead-eyed nature of real minigolf statues, but I'm not sure that's a vibe you want to be going for. Listen, bro, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this. Just stay with me, bro. Also, from looking up footage of this game, it seems like you can receive extra stage animations if you get a, quote, good shot. But it's never made clear what the game defines as a, quote, good shot. I've hole and won this rocket ship stage at least 4 times, and I never got any blasties.
And I do want them blasties.
The only one I was able to activate at all, let alone more than once, was the one in the sawmill hole. Oh great, chairs. Can never have enough of those. Okay, no more backhanded slagging. I like the attention to detail in the non-visual aspects, like the instruments that they use to simulate insect noises in the bug hole. And the fact that every hole has its own individual varied set of announcers that differ on every playthrough. And all with varying degrees of racial insensitivity.
Part 3, volcano hole. Very good.
Yeah, sure. Time to blanch and put the ball through the windmill.
Abominable. 3 shots, Papa.
Welcome to Los Jungle Ruins Hall, señores. Here the party 5.
And for me personally, it's nifty to see the earlier stages of course concepts that would later show up in Minigolf Maniacs. So all things considered, I do fully understand the nostalgia towards it, and like all things with positive reception, it was only a matter of time before something new became of it.
Deluxe!
Not 1 year later, a sequel/expansion pack was birthed onto the world, and it was titled, predictably, Bigfoot Software Spielberg for the Ghost Familiar, or, as it is more commonly referred to amongst us mere mortals, 3D Ultra Minigolf Deluxe. Not an ounce of creativity wasted on these fine folk. And even though all it really did was revamp all the menus and add an extra 9 holes, the entire rest of the first game is preserved as well. And the new holes they added are, for the most part, not only perfectly in spirit of the original, but often offer way more experimental ways of getting from point A to B. Although I will have to direct some complaints towards Banshee Castle, not only because it took me a million tries to get my ball in the right entrance, but it also has a live spider roaming the course, which would have been more than enough to make my younger self never touch this hole ever again. Oh, and also, Cloud 9 is the worst hole in the whole game. There's no way of planning or aiming where you're going, and 95% of the time you fall off and get penalized for it, so there's no hope in guessing how to even get to the hole, much less comprehend what you even did to get there in the first place.
Fiddlesticks.
And that's really all I can say about it. It's an expansion pack. Now, more of the same. If you liked 3D Ultra Minigolf and wished it was deluxe, then get 3D Ultra Minigolf Deluxe. Blah, 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 blah. Can we please talk about the title of the video now? We can? Oh, lovely. Okay, so here's the Skippy. In 2001, Dynamics were working on a spiritual successor to the 3D Ultra Minigolf games with more cartoony visuals and full, non-fake, authentic, homegrown 3D environments with full camera control to be titled Minigolf Maniacs and to be released on PC and PS2. And if you ask me, I think this would have been a downright necessary addition to the sparse library of dedicated minigolf games for the PS2, of which there were only 3, and by 3 I of course mean 1 with 3 different paint jobs. Yeah, the Hot Shots golf game still had minigolf modes, as did Madagascar on PS2, but those were never outwardly advertised game aspects most of the time. And even when they were, they still weren't really what you bought the game for. Plus, they were kind of comparatively drab and samey in the visual department. Not uninteresting by any stretch, but still kind of leaving a bit to be desired. But regardless, whichever half of the PS2 aesthetic you ultimately prefer, you can't deny that golf games were skewed pretty highly in favor of simulations. We needed an easy-to-pick-up and play mini-golf game with creative visuals and memorable design to offset the blandness. Which is why, on August 13th, 2001, when the game was nearing completion, at the very last minute, and I mean so last minute that previews were showing up in the official PlayStation magazine that very same month, Dynamics was closed by Sierra's parent company, forever depriving us of a charming PS2 cult classic mini-golf game, and forcing the innocent masses to make do with, God help us, crazy golf. Until one day when some golf game enthusiasts got in touch with the original game developers and worked alongside them to make the game not only publicly available, but also provided a mod that allowed it to become a completed product. And even though this game takes heavily after its predecessors, even down to using the exact same program icon, Minigolf Maniacs is such a step up in terms of quality. I mean, the title screen theme alone sets the bar for quality right away. This theme has everything: funk guitars, horns, window wiping, the auto-tune screeches of a dying heron, and a heavily sedated woman spinning around on a teacup ride. And I'm happy to report that after all this time, the game is exactly how I remember it. This game is everything that a miniature golf game should aspire to be. Easy to grasp controls, memorable visual and set design, unique course designs and set pieces, plenty of camera control, a vast array of unique characters, and online multiplayer functionality. Why aren't more people singing this game's praises? If I can do my part in fishing this game up from Niche Ravine, that can only be a good thing, because I genuinely feel the love and passion that this game explodes with. You wanna know how I know this game is brilliant? Because one of the characters is a putter that you can play as, and when it goes over par, it spins. This game should be state mandated. The attention to detail is something that you just don't see in games nowadays. It's little things like that the clubs of each character have different shapes that reflect their putting statures, or how some of the other players in tournament mode are named after other Sierra Dynamics characters, or how each set of 3 holes has diegetic pathways and ladders that make it physically possible to reach certain areas instead of just claiming video game logic, or how you can look to the horizon and see the other 2 courses. It really makes the whole thing feel like a real location. And in one of my favorite features, if you keep pressing the camera angle button after sinking a shot, you can make the game do this. But by far, one of the most memorable aspects of the game for me is the color commentary from the announcers. Tom Bunker and Chip Green are among some of the most memorable duos in sports game history, and they not only provide helpful hints and tips for the holes,
the trick is to hit it hard enough to avoid the water, but not overshoot the cup.
but also some surprisingly well-written one-liners.
Now here's somebody who can really shout it out.
I thought you were the champ when it came to that, Chip.
Ouch!
And some liners.
Sounds like a typical day at the OK Corral.
They make a great habanero burger there. Explains a lot, actually.
So while the game is mini-golf at its base level, it tends to stave off most mini-golf cliches unless it can put some sort of unique spin on them. If this was just grass in a field, it wouldn't be much to write home about, but the unique themes, locations, and set pieces of every level help to add memorability and flavor to even the most simplistically shaped courses. What? Oh, it's okay, you can be horny for Slice if you want. She's asking for it. The holes are brimming with personality as well. In RoboPutt, the giant robot wishes you good luck at the start. In Wacky Windmill, the plants that eat and spit out your ball if you get too close to them also eat and spit out passing butterflies. In Country Comfort, you can hit your ball into this outhouse and interrupt Ghost Hillbilly. And yeah, the graphics haven't exactly aged the greatest. It is a 2001 game after all. Worse yet is how it's still confined to the 640x480 aspect ratio. Sure, there's technically an option for bigger window sizes, but honestly, not only can I barely see any graphical improvements if there were any at all, but it also makes the UI way too small and also doesn't work for the menus. So honestly, you're better off just staying at 6fo. But honestly, it may just be my nostalgia talking, but I genuinely think that these mid to low poly graphics combined with the bright cartoony color palette carry a special kind of charm by themselves. I never played Toontown Online back in the day, but I totally get more or less the same kind of visual vibe from it. And looking at how most games of a similar graphical ilk were remastered, yeah, they still look pretty, but it still ultimately feels like an identity overhaul. I just don't think this kind of cartoonish eye candy and color contrast can coexist alongside good graphics. But all that aside, the game still holds up wonderfully as a game, and when compared directly to 3D Ultra Minigolf, there are noticeably more simplistic and straightforward non-gimmicky holes, but they aren't so generic that they feel unmemorable. The developers clearly thought about the course design so that players can develop a strategy for each hole and feel good about conquering them repeatedly instead of just feeling like they're going through the motions. And you know what else is feel-good worthy? This footage of me totally nailing gears, the hardest hole in the whole game at the very end of the final cup. Yeah, baby! Or, you know, you could get stuck in a bumper. This is exemplary course design. There's never just one way to approach a hole, and the limit to 3 holes per theme keeps the holes interesting and helps to prevent monotony or running out of ideas. Moreover, whenever you sink a shot, instead of just playing a crowd noise and immediately smash cutting to the scoreboard, you get a satisfying triumphant jingle and a unique special character animation. Speaking of, with the advent of selectable characters, a lot of the humor is more focused around the characters and their distinct personalities, so the stages not being as extra as they are in 3D Ultra doesn't hamper the charm at all. And the characters themselves are all masterfully characterized. I really need to stop saying the word character. They all convey an impressive amount of personality in their animations, though I personally main Mulligan because I find him the most endearing. He wears golfing flippers, man.
Golfing flippers.
The music is top-notch too. It's a bit more subdued and not as wacky or in-your-face as 3D Ultra, but that doesn't make it bad by any stretch. It's still quite catchy and the tracks fit the themes of the areas perfectly, but there's way more to the game than just looking and sounding pretty. In terms of the main game, you can play in tournament mode, where you pick a character and go for the main 4 cups trying to get the best score possible, improving your character's stats with bonus holes, and unlocking characters either by getting hole-in-ones on certain holes, finishing with the top score over the 2 days of each cup, or by installing the mod, which unlocks all of them for you. Or you can play putt around, which allows you to play 1 hole or cup at a time, either in local multiplayer or with computer players, and also with power-ups that can either give you the competitive edge or stifle the other players, and that the computer opponents never know how to properly utilize. Seriously, these are the dumbest CPU opponents I've ever seen in a game. Even if you set the difficulty to hard, they just keep shooting backwards, going in circles, or using their power-ups too early. And under the right circumstances, sometimes resulting in such fascinating displays of mass imbecility as this. Or you could even make your own courses, and please let me know if there's a level editor out there with more daunting music than this, because this is pretty daunting. Do you like my course? I call it Erectus.
Or you could play coins. Coins.
Or, if you're willing to do a few extra steps, you can always create an online lobby and play with friends over the internet. This is surprisingly unexpected that it would be included here, and it's probably even easier nowadays with the advent of Discord and such. It's also here where you get to experience a whole 5 new course sets, which I can only infer to be unused beta/test holes that were kept in for posterity reasons. Long story short, I understand why they're online only.
At the end of the day, though, Minigolf Maniacs is still a competently made product, and one that I recommend people download if they're looking for a good time. I just don't understand why it remains so unspoken of. Surely something must have become of it. Well...
9 times out of 10, if you do any amount of research into Minigolf Maniacs or the 3D Ultra series in general, then this image will haunt you like a specter. This is 3D Ultra Minigolf Adventures, released for PC in December of 2006, followed by an Xbox 360 release 4 months later in April of 2007, and developed by Wanacle Games, who would later develop games like Fallout Shelter and... Doritos Crash Course, and who basically repurposed a good chunk of the content from the unfinished Minigolf Maniacs with a smattering of new content here or there. And the thing is, in a vacuum, this game is pretty good. Nothing phenomenal by any stretch, but still an okay time sink if you're one of those people who is allergic to not spending money on video games. But ultimately, Adventures just has some sort of je ne sais quoi about it that makes me prefer it less over Minigolf Maniacs. Don't get me wrong, everything's decently modeled, and the music is passable if a bit forgettable at times, and some of the new stage gimmicks can be pretty interesting. But for all of this, there's also a fair bit of this. I will give Adventures this. I like the approach that they gave to power-ups in single-player mode. Unlike in Maniacs, where the power-ups were random and you can just grab them if you wanted to, Adventures has specific unvarying power-ups placed strategically in ways that incentivize good players to strategize where and how to use them and to improve their scores on those specific stages. And certain holes are actually built with these specific power-ups in mind and take advantage of their capabilities in interesting ways, like how the Fireball power-up can disintegrate spiderwebs and such. But going back to the negatives here, the physics blow, everything's way too floaty, and the traction is close to non-existent. The amount of times I kept either overshooting or undershooting my shots bordered on unfair sometimes. That, plus the characters' lack of substantial facial expressions and the way they move like ambulant piles of molasses, makes the whole game just feel sedate and lifeless. There's also very few sound effects and completely no character voices, and when there are sound effects, it's usually reserved for the cacophonous environmental ambience or the world's loudest crabs. Honestly, aside from the graphics, this could pass for a mobile game. The whole thing just feels physics engine-y, if that makes sense. It certainly doesn't feel like it was made from the shell of Minigolf Maniacs. And it's not just the bad physics and lack of charm that makes adventures fall flat, the level design is worse too. Take Dungeon Creep, for example. In Minigolf Maniacs, the timing of the lasers is visually indicated in advance by the laser pass fading in, which makes it easy to cancel your shot if you don't time it correctly. And if you overshoot the field entrance, it just leads you to a dead end that briefly inconveniences you, and it's not that hard to get back up and on your feet. Here, in Laserific, there's no warning, so you just have to eyeball it and hope that your shot isn't so underpowered that it gets vaporized, or so overpowered that it goes into the alternate path of the trap door, which also has no time warning and gives you a penalty if it goes in, both of which are equally possible given the aforementioned physics. It makes for an unnecessary difficulty increase at best and straight up bad game design at worst. Here's another example: Space Station. In the original, the teleporters and their respective platforms were color-coded, and you could easily spot which one was which from a distance, which allowed good players to plan out their routes and optimize their run of the hole. In Adventures, all of that is removed, so you just have to trial and error which hole leads where, which ends up being more painful than it needs to because of the physics. Even Gears, the hardest hole in the original game, is made a total joke here. In the original, if you wanted to go for a clean shot, not only did the physics not allow you to just soar brazenly over everything, but there was also a slowdown strip in between the two gears that meant you had to accurately time your shot in accordance with the gear's rotations and the hold back of the strip. Here, whoops, see you later! Altogether, 3D Ultra Minigolf Adventures turns one of the greatest minigolf games of all time into a tub of margarine. Just a big, unengaging, and fundamentally empty pile of canola and sunflower oil that only exists to accentuate other sandwich ingredients that do manage to hold up by themselves. When you're unironically reminding me of Crazy Golf, that's when you know that you're crazy garbage. They made a sequel, 3D Ultra Minigolf Adventures 2, is better than the first one. Yeah, I was fully expecting this game to just be an unimaginative tack-on expansion to the original, but surprisingly, I ended up liking it way more than the first one. I mean, it obviously can't hold a candle to Minigolf Maniacs, but I don't think it needs to. Right away, this game has a way better character customization system, allowing you to further personalize your character, and, that's not what I think it is it? Oh, thank God. That would have bumped up the rating. Despite it using the same engine as 1, the thing that makes 2 the better game in my book is the increase in visual variety. There's way more stuff going on, background details, all that good stuff. It makes the levels way more interesting to look at and play through. Ghost Penguin. There are more sound effects too. I mean proper sound effects that actually come from things in the setting. In fact, maybe there's a bit too much sound effects. And even though there's only 4 total themes, just like in 1, each theme is wisely delegated to its own cup instead of being dispersed evenly like in 1. And the themes themselves have an unprecedented amount of depth to them, and the developers were able to get a lot of visual variety out of them while still having them make sense for the theme. I was fully expecting them to just plonk some basic courses into the same environment over and over, but they go all in on the visuals, and the amount of things they're able to do with the visuals is something to be admired. How many golf games do you know of that dedicate an entire section to the inventions of Leonardo da Vinci? And public indecency. This does mean that the courses tend to veer on the overly complex side of things, which in turn possibly makes them less memorable, but in the moment, they still manage to take you on quite the journey. I think my favorite part was this bit in one of the haunted holes, where you have to get this spring power-up and get the ball onto this conveyor that keeps giving you spring power-ups, and you have to time using them exactly right to get them over the holes. And if you get to the end, it sends you through this painting portal and gives you a hole-in-one. That's an impressive use of the game mechanics that I would have never expected. Sure, the physics are still the same, and there are a couple of unfair courses, but I still massively prefer this over the first one. This is a game that absolutely merits a promotional Taco Bell demo disc. I don't see you meriting a promotional Taco Bell demo disc.
3D Ultra Minigolf Adventures, as a series, mostly holds its own. But I still think Minigolf Maniacs is altogether the more memorable and fun game. And I seriously wish more people would play and talk about it. It really deserves it. I'd even be okay with a remaster if they did it right. Something better needs to be done with this game. Maybe, just maybe, by putting out this video, I can be the epicenter of a full-scale Minigolf Maniacs interest revival. Or not, we'll see.